If you were looking for an excuse to sign up for a Hulu subscription now that they've eliminated their free option, Marvel may have just given you one. This week it was announced that Marvel Television will bring an adaptation of Runaways to the streaming service. Produced by Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage, Runaways tells the story of a group of children that find out that their parents are all supervillains and team up against them. No details yet on how the concept will be adapted to the Marvel Cinematic Universe or when the project might begin. And speaking of bringing down evildoers, after 14 years of producing clickbait, artificial outrage, and tabloid garbage, Gawker.com is shutting down next week. The news hit shortly after Gawker was purchased by Univision for $135 million at Gawker's bankruptcy auction. Gawker went into bankruptcy earlier this year after losing a lawsuit filed against them by Hulk Hogan, who sued the company after they posted a video of the former wrestler having sex with his friend's wife. A jury awarded Hogan $115 million in damages and hit Gawker with an extra $25 million in punitive damages. While Gawker.com itself is going down, the company's other 6 sites will presumably continue to operate under the ownership of Univision. Big gaming news out of Germany this week from Gamescom, starting with bad news for Final Fantasy XV. Remember earlier this year when Square Enix held that big event where they teased the crowd with a November 30th release day, only to roll it back to September? Well, they probably should have left that counter where it was. At Gamescom, it was announced that Final Fantasy XV has been delayed 2 months, setting a new release date for November 29th. Director Hajime Tabata explained that the game was delayed in order to avoid the necessity of a Day 1 patch in the event that somebody with a PlayStation 4 and the disposable income to buy a $60 game wouldn't have internet access. Of course, the extra time will also give them a chance to polish the game, getting in some last-minute bug fixes, visual optimizations, and game balancing. Also at Gamescom, there was an interesting reveal from Konami. The game developer hasn't generated a lot of goodwill among gamers lately, particularly since the departure of Hideo Kojima. It's been speculated that Konami may even be moving away from video games altogether. Well, not quite yet. At Gamescom, Konami announced the first post-Kojima entry in the Metal Gear franchise, a follow-up to Metal Gear Solid 5 that appears to be a co-op survival game that pits you against crystal-headed zombies. Truly, they have their hand on the pulse of the gaming community. Speaking of survival horror, Capcom offered another look at Resident Evil 7. The Lantern gameplay trailer is spooky enough, but still really doesn't tell you what the game is about or how it relates to the franchise. Meanwhile, new footage of Yooka-Laylee shows you exactly what the game is about, so if you liked Banjo-Kazooie, this is basically that. Finally, plenty of news coming from Blizzard this week, starting with the introduction of Alarak to StarCraft 2's co-op mode. Everybody's favorite evil Protoss isn't just getting some exposure in StarCraft though, he's also coming to Heroes of the Storm in the game's upcoming Machines of War update. Alarak appears to be a melee fighter that uses Discord Strike to silence enemies, Telekinesis to reposition them, and Lightning Surge to shoot lightning. For ultimates, you can pick between Deadly Charge, which seems like an appropriate description, or Counter-Strike, which reflects attacks back to enemies. The StarCraft theme update will also introduce 2 Terran-style maps. Brax's Holdout lets you build up an army of captive Zerg and use them to rush the enemy walls, meanwhile Warhead Junction will let you collect warheads and use them to drop nuclear blasts. It's not all StarCraft themed though. Overwatch's Zarya is also making her way to Heroes of the Storm. Zarya comes with her particle grenade, a personal barrier, and the ability to shield an ally. Presumably, damage done to the shields will increase her damage as they do in Overwatch. For ultimates, Zarya has her standard Graviton Surge, which collects enemies into a central location, or she can reverse that with Expulsion Zone to repel them. And speaking of Overwatch, the German gaming convention seems like a great place to announce the new map Eichenwald, the former home of Reinhardt. This map will have the attacking team escort a battering ram through the city and into a ruined castle. In spite of how it looks in the trailer, Eichenwald is not a reverse hybrid map. Attackers will have to make a lengthy push before activating the battering ram, which they will escort all the way to the end. And if you'd like to see how the castle got to be in the state it's in, check out Blizzard's latest animated short, The Last Bastion, detailing the heartwarming origin story of everybody's most and/or least favorite minigun robot. Hitting theaters this week, we have a Lionsgate double feature starting with Mechanic Resurrection. Jason Statham is a retired assassin that gets pulled back into the business to save Jessica Alba and Tommy Lee Jones. In other words, Jason Statham doing Jason Statham things for an hour and 40 minutes. Next up from Lionsgate, we have Bloodfather. If you're a pretty teenage girl on the run from drug dealers, make sure that your estranged father is Mel Gibson because he'll take care of it. In other words, Mel Gibson doing Mel Gibson things for an hour and a half. And finally, Don't Breathe. A trio of thieves bite off a little more than they can chew when they decide to rob the wrong blind guy. Not really sure who to root for in this one. In video games this week, you asked for it and you got it. Everybody's favorite cyborg returns for Deus Ex: Mankind Divided. In a post-apocalyptic world where the augmented people and natural humans are on the verge of war, Adam Jensen is stuck between both sides. Use stealth or brute force to navigate the game and shape the future of the world as you do it. Next up, there's Duelist, a free-to-play collectible tactics game that looks like chess if chess had 400 different pieces to pick from. Hard to say how the game is mechanically, but the pixel art style is pretty nice. Meanwhile, Mugen Soul Z is our anime-styled RPG of the week. I'm honestly not sure how this game plays or what it's even about, but it does seem to feature spaceships, giant robots, and giant robot dragons, so that's something. Moving over to something a little more simplistic, there's N++. Pretty sure everybody's played at least one version of this game at one point or another, and this seems to be more of the same. A lot more thanks to the user-generated levels. For something a little different, Tavernier puts you in the role of a barkeep where you have to keep your doors open in a fantasy world through a series of strange happenings. Sounds like it could be cool. And finally, Evil Robot Traffic Jam HD, another VR tower defense game that really doesn't look like it needs the VR. That brings us to this week's CGBros video. Appropriately timed for the release of Deus Ex, we have Renkuwa from the Animation School. It's the story of a little boy who could use a little more than a hand. And this week's awesome video couldn't be anything other than the Animated Adventures of Firefly teaser from Stephen Parn, which, like the show itself, fills you with joy before making you despair over what could have been. And because that video is so short that I basically showed you the entire thing already, here's another one from Sheath Entertainment, who recreated the opening scene from Sonic Adventure.
Huh? What's up?
That's everything for this week, so what was your favorite thing to come out of Gamescom? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe, pass this video around to your friends, and have a great week.